Laura, thank you for being with us. Your research over many years and probably a much more, I would say, official capacity. And I want to be listening to you even more than I want to listen to my own books. But because you are a professor of psychology and a psychologist, and and what you studied, and obviously your book, A Long Bright Future, comes right into the intersection of retire sooner. You even talk about how I want to actually ask you. We'll get to this. Those who retire maybe really early, what's the issue with cognitive decline? But so there's all these other things I want to get to, but maybe I want to start with just this thought around if as we get older, are we happier? And maybe describe, I've read a lot about the happiness U curve where we start happy, we get a little less happy, and then over time as we age, we get to retirement, happiness levels tend to rise. So let's start with that. Is that true? Do you believe that?
Well, the studies you just described, and with findings that are referred to as the U shape of happiness, are actually studies of life satisfaction. So they're asking people not questions about specific emotions. Are you angry? Are you sad? Or how often are you excited? They're asking people to evaluate their lives. And what the finding is that younger people tend to say things are great. In the middle years, less so. And then as people get older, they start to say, yeah, they're terrific, again. The findings about emotion are actually a little different. And that is there's more of a linear change from young adulthood to older adulthood where people experience fewer and fewer negative emotions over time. And there's some evidence that they're experiencing more positive emotions. So if you're talking about emotion or you're talking about satisfaction, you get slightly different profiles.
Well, let's dive into that because the reality here. So I interviewed Emily Estefani-Smith, who was studied positive psychology, and I remember her talking about the reason I had her on this on the Retire Sooner podcast is that she kind of did a little jab at the word happiness. Like we're looking for happiness, and really it's not about happiness, it's about purpose. And it's made me think because I write about happiness, and the reality here is that it's really just a catch-all umbrella type word that is, I think, colloquially, if I can say that correctly, maybe it's part life satisfaction and it's part emotion, but maybe you and I dive into what are the differences between those two.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And these are important distinctions. I think when in the literature and the headlines and newspapers, when they say older people are happier, I think that the definition there is something like, I'm good. I'm doing okay.
Okay.
Right? It's not how happy are you on a scale of 1 to 10. And if we ask that question, there's very little difference between younger and older people. So if you really focus in on a specific emotion, then happiness looks pretty evenly distributed, regardless of age. The real action comes with age in having fewer negative emotions. So in some of our work, what we've done is to subtract negative emotions from positive emotions and come up with a term on balance. So it's kind of like on balance, I'm doing very well. If you calculate well-being or happiness, doing well that way, it looks like people do better and better across the life course. But it's different. And here's the other thing I'll add is that life satisfaction is a cognitive question. It's an evaluation. Generally, when you ask somebody if they're satisfied with their life, they're not just focusing on emotional feelings. It's, have I made it to this point I thought I would? How do I compare to other people? How do I compare to my life today versus 5 years ago? And that's a very deliberative kind of a judgment about one's life. It's not a how happy are you or how sad are you? That's a different question.
So I wonder then too, if I were to, again, it's too late to update my book, but if I were to...
Well, you're in good company if your headlines aren't happiness. So.
So maybe it's too late to update this, but really what people then are and I ask a series of different happiness questions. You know, how would you rate yourself on a happiness scale? What is your life purpose? And there's several different things I ask, but really what it's probably coming back to is part emotion and part life satisfaction. And your point on life satisfaction, it is a little bit of a measure of my life. Hey, I feel like I've done okay up to here. You know, I have some kids, I love them, or I didn't want to have kids and I'm great with that, or I think the job went pretty well, or it didn't go so well. Right. And then you're talking about when you do this calculation or when you research on balance, take me through that for a minute. So if somebody has a couple positive, couple negative on balance, maybe an example of that.
Well, I'll tell you about a study that we ran where we used a method called experience sampling, and we had people aged 18 to 95 carry electronic pagers. Back in the day, we had pagers, and we would sample them random times during the day, 5 times a day for 7 days.
What were the ages again? 18 to what?
18 to 94 is the first sample. Then we followed them over time, so that age range changes slightly, but pretty much the same. And so you're carrying a pager and it's just you're going on with your life and you hear a beep and we ask you to stop. And then what people tell us is the degree to which they're feeling each of 19 different emotions. Some of those are positive emotions like excitement, calm, joy. Some of them are negative emotions like sad, fearful, anxious. And we collect all those data. And initially, by the way, we thought the positive emotions would be easily to distinguish. Joy would look different than happiness and so on. And then the negative emotions, we really thought like sadness would be different than anger and all. But it looks like these positive emotions, the set of them, and the set of negative emotions track each other pretty well. So we just collapsed those two groups, the positive ones and the negative ones. And as I said when we first started talking, positive emotions don't increase very much by age. They do a little bit, and some studies find this too. But the real action is that people are reporting to us that they're feeling negative emotions less frequently.
Becomes less. So we have similar positive emotions throughout our life cycle. Right. But for some reason, we're having less and less negative emotions.
So on balance, you're happier. Yeah, you're more positive.
Then what is this happiness U curve? What is the relationship with that? Is
the U curve? This is what's interesting is they're not
because it's
that
life
strongly related.
The
life satisfaction is this evaluation of life, which is a different thing than emotional trajectories across life. The way I describe it to people is if I say to you, how satisfied are you with your life? You go into this judgment evaluation as you were describing a minute ago. If I say, Wes, right now, on a scale of 1 to 10, how angry are you? It's a different source. It's a very different question. And what we wanted to know is how do people feel emotionally as they go about their daily lives, which is a different question than how satisfied they are. In fact, you could be really happy when I sample you, but say, I really haven't. I compared to other people, I'm pretty much a failure.
Compared to other podcasts, we don't get nearly enough listeners. I feel low. But I feel pretty good about life in general. I'm happy today because it's 81 and sunny outside.
There you go.
Okay, so this is great. There's two. So I'm getting smarter around this. It's a good sign because it means our audience is learning something. And so we think of the U curve is more life satisfaction. And when it comes to emotions on balance being more positive, negative, it's more of a direct relationship over time.
There you go.
Touchdown. Okay.
Yes. Now, and it's getting better as we get older.
And now why? Why do these why do we have less negative emotions over time? I love this.
Yeah, I think it's one of the best kept secrets about aging. There's something called the misery myth that I talk about a lot. People just assume when you talk about loneliness or depression or anxiety, it must be greater in older people, given that old age is so terrible. I mean, that's kind of how we think. And this is often referred to as the paradox of aging, and it is one of the most scrutinized findings in aging research because nobody believed it, including the scientists. So, when these findings first started to come out, people said, "Oh, it's masked depression. They're just not admitting to the depression." And then some other people said, "Well, it's because of cognitive decline." So older people just can't focus enough attention on how lousy they feel to really work up a good lather, of negativity. So there was all of these questions. And other people said, by the way, it's a brain issue, that the amygdala atrophies. And so we just can't feel emotions the way we did when we were young. All of the things I just raised, these issues, have been examined, and none of them are supported with evidence.
From the thesis for many years was that we do really we do get less happy over time. And then when did that get debunked? And was that you were the doctor that did this. You're the doctor that debunked this.
My group and I, yes, we did a lot of work on this issue. Other people did too, of course. So as in most, sort of scientific, areas, there are a lot of people contributing to it. But yes, we did a lot of work, my group, in this. And in part, it's because we developed a theory called Socio-Emotional Selectivity theory, worst name ever for a theory. And that theory has generated a lot of research. The theory was developed to try to account for the fact that you see rates of positive emotions staying stable, negative emotions going down, despite the very real problems people face as they get older.
Socio-emotional and connectivity.
Selectivity theory.
Selectivity.
Yeah.
Were you at Stanford, by the way, when all this, did you do all this while at Stanford?
Almost all of it, yes. I've been at Stanford for 30 years, so yes, a long time.
So that's why there's so much research that comes out of Stanford that I read about. It's because of you.
Well,
it is.
You're giving me way too much credit.
We should get her on the show. We should get Laura on the show. She's the one that you're like the godmother of all the happiness research. Our producers are so good to have found you. I've read your work tangentially for so many years, and it's all your fault, in a good way. In a good way. Yeah, you're part of my inspiration to have probably gone down this path about 10 to 12 years ago. Okay, so we did you answer why? So you've said that the thesis was that we're just kind of our brains are dumbed down so that we don't feel negative emotion. You disproved that, but but why then?
So the mechanism that we think is accounting for much of this of age effect is time horizons, and that is that the older we get, the less time we see in our futures. That is, the older we get, the more likely we are to die, right? So life is limited. It's a fixed period of time. And when we're young, we see the future and our future time horizons as infinite, essentially. Mm-hmm. And the time seems, and our opportunities seem like anything could happen. We've got all the time in the world, mm-hmm. and we need to prepare because anything could happen. So there's a lot of things we need to do. But as people get older, time ahead of them is viewed as more constrained. And if there's a paradox of aging, we think it's that as people are running out of time, so to speak, they're actually doing better emotionally. We believe that that's because of the basic economic kind of principle that the less of something you have, the more valuable it is.
Yeah. So as my supply of time goes down, it becomes more valuable to me cognitively. Right. And for some reason, we've been designed to appreciate that, and it starts to well, again, we said that emotion didn't go up, or positive emotion didn't go up, negative emotion just started to go away. I guess it's still a function of this time horizon.
Right. What we've shown in a lot of different studies is that our goals change. When time horizons are long, we tend to be exploring and collecting and taking risks. When time horizons are shorter, We tend to focus on the present, live in the moment, and we pursue goals that are meaningful, that are important to us. I say to students in classes, imagine we knew this was the last year of our lives. Something was going to happen. This would be it. How many of you would still want to take this course? And, they're all gone by the time I finish that sentence. They've walked out of the room. We're not so interested in preparing when we don't have a lot to prepare for. And in some ways, I think the emotion story of aging is one about being relieved of the burden of the future. So when we're young, we're constantly having to prepare. We're worried about so many things that might happen or might not. Are we going to meet our soulmates? Are we going to be happy when we do 50 years later? Are we going to get a good job? Everything is about the next step. It's hard for young people to just live in the moment.
Yeah.
But the older we get, the easier that is. And when we do live in the moment, we stop and, to be, quaint, we stop and smell the roses. We notice the bird in the tree, the beautiful blue in the sky, and life feels better.
The burden of the future. The burden of the future. It starts to wane, happiness levels go up, or on balance, happiness levels go up. What about during COVID? Do you think that did let's say older folks fare better?
Yeah.
During COVID, or no?
It's a really interesting question, and it's interesting theoretically too, because selectivity theory, the selectivity in it is saying people are more, they've honed their environments, their social networks, so we're more selective. And there's another theory that refers to this selection process as something that older people need in order to do well. And if older people were exposed to an inescapable, prolonged stressor, they would do much worse than younger people would, because they don't have the biological, physiological capacity to regulate emotion. And so COVID appears, and I'm talking to my research group, and we say, this is the time to test that hypothesis, because it's an interesting hypothesis. But you could never do it in an experiment because it would be unethical, right? Let's bring older people into the lab and expose them to terrible things and don't let them escape. And so that's not going to happen. Hopefully that never will. But in a sense, it was happening. It was happening to all of us. It was inescapable. And COVID was a greater threat to older people than younger people by far. So we ran the same kind of surveys we've done in the past, asked them about specific emotions, 19 different emotions, some positive, some negative. Older people are doing much better than younger people. And I think our group was the first to show that, but there are probably now a dozen other studies that have shown the same thing. And one of them, importantly, it surveyed people in more than 60 countries and looked at age differences and found the same kind of pattern.
And again, it's similar hypothesis as to why.
Yep. And we think the age difference might have been a little bit changed in some ways, and that is that younger people actually were changing their goals too. So you could think of COVID as a priming of mortality, which is what we think happens as we grow older, is that we increasingly are aware that life isn't going to go on forever, and so life becomes more precious.
So it exacerbated that even more for those who were in the older demographic.
Right.
That's so interesting. Okay, so what about, let's switch. It's funny, we're like I'd say a Bush League version of what you guys do at Stanford, because during COVID, we tried to do this. We did the same thing. We really did. I went out and I said, let's try. We have this time where everyone's trapped in the lab and they're exposed to horrible things. Mm-hmm. Let's see how everyone's doing. The research we did was a little bit different around seeing the importance of social connectedness and how what the proclivity was in different age groups on trying to still remain social. Yeah. And we found, of course, this direct correlation between more socialization, more happiness. And and one of the things that I've done in longer studies is I call these close connections.
Yeah.
And because friendship to me was not quite the perfect word. I wanted it to be a little broader than friendship. So I describe it as close connections for socialization. And I always have found this plateauing effect of money and happiness, where there's a lot of increase in, quote, happiness in the early stages of accumulating money or earning money, and then it plateaus. You probably started all that research now I'm talking to you. And that's proven out. So I think of this as the kind of money and happiness plateauing effect, more diminishing marginal happiness with new dollars, right? Yeah. But I did not find that with socialization. I found just a straight line, just more close connections, more happiness, more close connections, more happiness, more close connections. And I'd love to hear your perspective on why that, A, do you agree with it? B, why is that? And C, let's also talk about social connectedness and longevity.
Let me start with that, social connections and longevity.
Yeah.
People who feel like they are alone in the world, like they really don't have close connections, are at higher risk of dying at a level comparable to those people who smoke compared to non-smokers. It's big. We are social animals, and when we're isolated from others, when we feel alone, it's bad for our health. There are actual physiological detrimental effects. So close connections, I think, that's the magic. The term you just used and the questions you were asking people was about close connections and significant people in their lives. And that is essential for people throughout life, whether they're old or young. But we do see changes in social network size from early life, early adulthood to later adulthood. And these networks are getting smaller and smaller. And again, when I first entered the field, a lot of people were saying, well, of course, older people must be doing terrible because we know social relationships are important, and they have smaller social networks.
Shrinking.
So we began to look at more qualitative aspects of those networks. And we asked people to name people in their social network, and younger people had more. But then we said, identify the people in that network who you really feel close to, who are so close you can't imagine life without. Turns out the number of close connections doesn't change with adulthood. So what we're doing with age is we're pruning our networks. We're getting rid of the riffraff, if you will. We're excluding those people who are not particularly emotionally meaningful to us, and we're retaining the ones that are. And we think this also contributes, by the way, to well-being in old age, because if you live in a world that's been distilled to include the best, then that's pretty nice.
What would be your opinion on the number of close connections? I've read lots of different things over the years of they've kind of gone down over time, even though social media has brought maybe, to your point, more riffraff into the fold. Less close connections than we had 30 years ago. I don't know if I've read that. I don't know if that's true. Yeah. Is there a number? If you put a number on this, like how many close people you need in your life?
Three. There you go. You got it. Although that's three among older people. So here's the thing about social connections and interactions is that, yes, we need them. And think for just half a second about where strong emotions come from. Negative, strong emotions. Almost always, where do they come from? Other people. It's social, it's friendships, it's connections, it's interactions. People drive you crazy. So
mother-in-laws.
There we go.
Except I love my mother-in-law, by the way. She's like one of my favorite people in the world. Yeah.
But there is a kind of a prototype image that we can all come up with, right?
That might be my mom. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
Negative emotions also come from social relationships. So it really matters on what's the nature of those social relationships. And what's happening today, and I think it's especially sad for younger people, really younger people, teenagers, right? They're in contact with thousands of people on social media and they're comparing themselves, and people are commenting on them, and that's horrible. You know, it's like social relationships are the magic in life, and they're also the horrifying aspect of life. I mean, so it really depends on what those relationships look like. What's
Yeah.
the nature of that network? Now, when we looked at older people, so we did a study. When I said three, we ran a study. Frieder Lang and I, years ago, ran a study where we were looking at the content of these social networks, and older people had fewer people in their network, but they were more. There were more, on as a ratio of positive, close net relationships. And we said, but there must be. So they're looking like they're in better mental health with fewer relationships until a point. We said there must be a point where you've got too few close people in your life.
Hmm.
And what we found in that study was the number was three. And I think it's that if you've only got three people in your life who you really can count on, and probably especially if you're older, it's too risky.
Mm.
Things happen.
Yeah.
People die. People get sick. There are limitations that people face. And so that's probably you probably need more than that, is what
Mm.
we expect.
So wait, so you had said three, and then three plus really is you want to be call it
Yeah.
four. Three plus is what we really need
Right.
going into
Yes.
retirement.
Yeah. Don't go below three. Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm. It's funny. In the chapter we did about social connectedness and general happiness, it was on average HROBs, or happiest retiree group, which we take our top two quintiles of reported happiness, and the bottom two we cut out the middle and we compare those two
Yeah.
groups. Was a little more than 3.5 on the happy end, and then it was 2.5 for the unhappy group.
Oh, interesting.
And
Yeah.
so, for what that's worth,
Yeah.
I feel like I
So
need
there
to
may
send
be
you
a
my book.
threshold.
I need to send you my book for you to give me a grade. I would have never. I'm going to send you the book as long as I get like a B minus or even a C plus. I would have never gotten into Stanford, so you would have never been my professor to begin with.
Oh, hey, neither would I.
Okay.
Just
That's the other thought, is that there is this thought around, and practically we leave the workforce, so we retire,
Yeah.
and even though your work people, let's say, are maybe not your close connections, they may
Yeah.
very well be,
Yeah.
but just all of the epicenter of work with the opportunity to find other close connections, because you have this
Right.
lots of tentacles into the world, that goes away for a lot of people, and I think it gets really tough.
Yeah.
Do you guys ever? How do you make up for that, and how do you correct for leaving
Yeah.
a big tentacle of socialization?
Yeah. Yeah, I think one of the core functions of work, which we often overlook, is that it provides for most people a sense of purpose. And so, yeah, there are social connections at work, and some are close, but even more than that, we're needed.
Yeah.
People on our work teams need us, whether we like them or not. And having something to get up for in the morning is important for all of us. And so that's, I think, a really important function of work. And people who retire and don't have other sources of purpose, and many people do, but if you don't, then it can leave people feeling really empty.
Speaking of, you talk about that America in general, let's say, or does tend to work too much,
Yeah,
and we don't vacation enough.
right.
And I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. I think we work really badly in this society. Um, and what feels to me almost criminal is that we just inherited 30 extra years in life from our ancestors in the 20th century. They handed us a gift of time, longer lives,
Longevity. So we have so much more
longevity.
longevity, but we're going to work so much more for so much longer.
Well, what we did was we tacked all those extra years on at the end. Only old age got longer, and everybody's complaining. Um, Young people are complaining, old people are complaining. We're saying people need to save now more money than ever. That pot of gold at the end has to get bigger and bigger, and it's harder and harder. How are we going to support people with programs like Social Security when people are going to retire for 30, maybe 40 years? And so it's a real problem. What we did was we're working really hard now in the middle of life, too, extra hard, because we got to save more money for later, right?
Yeah.
So we're we're not as happy as we could be with work in middle age because it's just too much. And we have other things we want to do, like we have kids to raise. Sometimes you have older relatives you're trying to provide some assistance to, and we make it really hard because we put in too many hours.
So that's what you refer to, Laura, as just when you say we work badly, we just work too much.
Way too much.
Way too much.
Way too much. Yeah.
Okay, like what? Like if like a 60-hour week is way too much.
Way too much. Yeah, probably a 40-hour work week is too much. You know, there's nothing magic about 40-hour work weeks. You know, this was Henry Ford,
Right.
who actually was cutting down the number of hours from 50 to 40 when he said work
Yeah.
week would be 40 hours. So, and now a lot of people, a lot of people are struggling to save for that pot of gold, you know, at the end, and they're working two jobs and stressed. And I'd like to see us work many more years past 62 and work fewer days in a week and work fewer hours in a day.
God bless you. Hallelujah. We're changing the schedule here at my whole firm. Guys, we're going to a 3-day work week, and we're going down from 10 hours down to 6.
Yeah.
How would that wouldn't be great? I'm looking around the studio here. Everyone's like, hallelujah. Yeah, I love that
Some of them
idea.
probably left already
Yeah,
just
they're
to go
gone.
home.
Yeah.
Now, Microsoft in Japan decided to run an experiment at the office, and they went to 4-day work weeks. The story, as I read it, is that they had to actually lock the doors because employees were trying to come in more. And they measured productivity, and productivity increased by 40% in 4-day work weeks
What?
from 5. Yeah. And there are a few other studies. I haven't seen, I must say, I haven't seen a very large sort of representative study of workers and different work hours and and productivity. But there are a number of examples of that companies have done that I read about, you know, in the newspaper or so on. And I don't know of one that didn't see productivity go up.
What a good advertisement.
Yeah.
You're literally, I mean, I'm actually thinking this through. Like maybe would be a great experiment for us to do that. We still would need coverage. So we'd have to say, still you need everybody here. Somebody needs to be available. But through balancing of schedules, you could just say, look,
Right.
let's do 4 days for everybody.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, I've thought about it too for my group, and I say let's say we're all here Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, so we see each other.
Mm-hmm.
But on these on Tuesday, Friday, you know, come in if you decide. So there's always somebody around, but that we don't have to be there, all of us, all the time. And you know, here's another thought experiment. Think of how many hours a day you're really, really working. That is, you're really on.
Yeah.
And for most people, those hours, as I ask people, it's about 4 or 5.
Yeah,
You know,
sure.
the rest
sure.
of the time you're standing around yabbering with people,
Doing
or you're,
podcasts.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's always, you know, how there's always like birthdays, and everybody's got to
Yeah.
come to the office, and you know, all this stuff happens.
We
right?
literally have a birthday cake half eaten in our break room. You're literally describing our lives. We hang out, we do podcasts.
Yeah.
We eat birthday cake. We celebrate each other's birthdays. Yay.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Takes up like half the day. Yeah.
Right. It does. So there's a lot of hours at work that we're not doing a lot of work. I think what's happening is if we went to fewer hours in a day and fewer days in a week, people would actually work more efficiently during that time.
I'm very convinced of this in a very short period of time. And I know that our studio is too. But what about vacations? Because again, I am so guilty of the vacation thing, and I've got 4 little kids.
Yeah.
I'm embarrassed to even say this, but I had a vacation recently, paid for, and I did not go
Yeah.
because
Did the kids go?
But no one went.
No.
Because Dad couldn't go, and I said, you guys, why don't you just go with why don't your mom, you guys go? And they were like, well, what's the, I have all boys.
Oh.
So they're like, well, who are we going to play golf? We're like, what are we going to do on vacation? Yeah. And then I don't know. That's embarrassing to even say. I've done this twice in my life. I did this about 10 years ago. I remember booking a house down in the Gulf Coast of Florida. A lot. These are not cheap, right? And not being able to go because work got too busy right up close to it. And then this past same thing happened, right? All these different things happening, work and podcasts and media and book, and wait a minute, I just can't get out of town which is exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
it's
why
a
are
horrible
so
thing
tell
you
me
did
about
to your children.
It's terrible for I'm a terrible father. Retire sooner than you think. I mean, it's, I'm trying to do all of the above, and I'm the one talking about balance, and sometimes I don't have it. I'm just, our viewership just went down. Or leave. No one's listening to the podcast anymore.
You are not.
This guy's
alone.
not even going on vacation. And I'm talking about happy retirees, by the way, on average, take 2.4 vacations a year. Now, these are retirees. Unhappy retirees take 1.4. So the happy retiree group actually takes an entire extra vacation per year. Statistically significant, very real data. But what about these vacations? Why are they so good? Convince me.
Well, we're also really bad, we Americans, at going on vacation. Mm-hmm. So, I would be willing to bet that the last time you actually did go on a vacation, you brought your handheld devices and your laptops and all this stuff. So we work even while we're on vacation. Yeah. So the good thing about breaking from work is that we're more creative. We're more rested. We want to come back instead of feeling
especially to that lower work schedule.
Yeah.
Especially down to the 3 day a week, 6 hour work week.
Yeah, imagine that you're gung ho to get back. You can't wait to see your colleagues for those 6 hours, and yeah.
So there is some real recharging, of course, with vacations. No question about it. Yeah. So when we think about longevity in general, there are all these implications around that, which you've kind of alluded to here. Is it's the gift of more time, but it's the burden of having to pay for it financially. We've got to save more.
But now in this model of longer working lives, that is more years, but fewer days in a week, you don't have quite the same burden and the strain of saving and saving and saving because your retired years are shorter.
If you plan on working a little bit longer, so you're lowering your overall RPMs,
right,
and saying we're going to go a little longer.
Yep.
So which is something that I think we should think about, right? I mean, we don't think about that. We're so intent here on Retire Sooner podcast is getting to that point financially where we don't have to work. But, maybe we do have a version of that though, Laura, because our thought is that we do end up kind of working in our highest specialization type, the specialization of labor. We don't necessarily get to choose the thing that we're the best at that makes us the most money. We typically feel like we have to do that to maximize our earning and savings. But if we get to a point, let's call it at 60 or 62, and we've saved almost enough, then I think of this in terms of this kind of this retirement gray zone where we go into another phase. Whereas America is very black and white, retired, not retired. And right. I think what I love this concept, and I think you're alluding to this, is that why not have a gray zone where you have another 10 years where you're doing something you really do love. Right. And it may be a huge income hit, right? You may be making $200,000 a year, and the thing that you really love to do only is going to pay you $50,000. But at least it's something so you don't have to tap your assets maybe as much or at all.
That's right. Imagine you delay, if you were going to continue to work till you're 80, 10 to 15 hours a week doing something, as you're saying, something you're really good at, because most of us like doing the things we're good at and don't like doing the things we're not as good at. You work 10, 15 hours a week. If you're healthy till you're 80, you can do really well with. You can save a lot less money because then you live on Social Security and your savings and your income. I also, we have this thing called loss aversion, that we don't like seeing our savings go down when we don't have anything coming in. But if we continued to work, we'd have money we thought of as, recharging, rejuvenating. We're going to get that pot. We're going to get another paycheck. It's not that we're just losing, which makes a lot of people nervous.
Anxious. Yeah.
I know what your argument on retiring sooner, and I have a slightly different version of it, and I think people should retire early and often. That is, we shouldn't just wait till we're older to go to these 10, 15 hours a week. When you're the parent of, for example, 4 young boys, you might want to put in fewer hours during that stage of life. You might have another period in life where you decide to go back to school or just go do something very different for a year or two. We could have different pots of money we're saving for, aspiring to, so that we can do different things. We don't have to wait until we're old to get to the leisure stage in life. Let's interweave leisure and work throughout, and education too, by the way.
I wanted to ask you about, again, we think about loneliness is obviously a problem, but when we think about the factors that have us exit early, and I remember Wall Street Journal did an article several years ago that essentially said that the dangers of retiring early, or why an early retirement will kill you. It was a great headline from Wall Street Journal, and a lot of it was that there's a lot of different statistics around. There's a spike in mortality when we turn age 62. Right? We do tend to get less active, and all the bad things like watching too much TV, smoking, drinking too much, all these things. And we know that all kind of kills us. Those are the kind of the standards, like, of course. But what are some of these other variables that maybe beyond just not smoking and lack of exercise that helps with longevity that might not be in those kind of core categories that we kind of already know?
Well, if I can make one comment on that literature on retirement, people who retire early are more likely to die than people who continue working. But if you control for if they're sick before they retired, that association is much reduced, if not eliminated, in most
Okay, so
studies.
some of the studies are a little bit biased. It's as though
Well, it goes the causal direction is the other way around.
okay.
Sick people retire because they can't work any longer, and a lot of jobs make us sick. So this is not trivial, but it's not. It doesn't mean retirement caused it.
Okay, so chalk that up to fitting the statistics to the scary headline of the Wall Street Journal. Can't believe they would do that. Amazing.
No, nor would any newspaper. No. The factors that we know predict longevity are ones you just really listed already. It's exercise, and then it's exercise, then it's exercise. I mean, that's huge.
Okay.
A sense of purpose contributes a lot. And for a lot of us, that sense of purpose really comes from our close relationships, and so close relationships are also predicting longevity. But that's really
wait, that's interesting. So you're saying that our close relationships give us a sense of purpose because we're
sure for many of us. I mean, people count on us, our loved ones. I often think. It's true for really old people. Some people say, well, if you're 90 years old, 95, and you can't really work anymore and you can't really get around, boy, if you're the matriarch of a family that adores you, you are serving a very important purpose for them. And you don't have to do anything. You're there for them. They know you, they love you, and they know that you love them, and that's a really important purpose in life. And then, in the end, that might be the most important purpose of all.
And it helps with longevity. What about money? Have you guys ever studied just wealth and longevity?
Yeah.
What's that look like?
Yeah. So you do see a relationship between you see a relationship between education and income and length of life. You see a relationship with education and income and functional health. That is, are you healthy enough to work? Not how many diseases that you have, if you have hypertension or whatever. It's not that. It's, can you live on your own, drive a car, pay your own bills? If you look at health that way, functional health is strongly related to income and education. It looks like education is actually the better predictor of that than the two. As you might imagine, they track together. Higher education is correlated strongly with higher income. But it looks like in people who have tried to tease out those factors conclude that education is probably a little more important than income.
So if I circle back to this earlier question that we started with is about the worry of cognitive decline if we retire a little early, I think you've kind of almost answered that throughout here. It's really a combination of all of these things, which is exercise, it's purpose and close connections kind of continuing to be this positive feedback loop so that we don't go into cognitive decline. Is the cognitive decline more about I'm working and I'm really working my brain versus I just have social connections? Is one a better mental exercise to stave off cognitive decline, or does it not matter as much?
It looks like brains need stimulating environments. Brains respond to stimulation, and that strengthens, neural connections and synapses, and so that's really good for us. Uh, but exercise is often probably one of the best things people can do, sort of prescriptively, for cognitive performance as well. Our brains need oxygen. Exercise is helping, blood supply and so on. So, exercise is also something really important for aging and cognition. Brain games, if I can insert this. So if you think you're going to
brain
get
games.
yeah,
Maybe we'll title this podcast that. I like that. Brain games.
brain games.
Yeah. Tell me about brain games.
They don't work.
Okay. Never mind. Here it is. Here's the title. Brain games don't work. Here it is.
Just
No,
never
sorry.
mind
Here it is.
brain games.
The
Yeah.
danger of brain games.
Well, here's the danger of them. You usually sit when you do them, and you really need to get up and exercise. So, but it looks like these brain games that turned into a huge industry, sort of exploiting people's fears of cognitive decline, uh, are are really, you get better at the games, but they don't transfer to the rest of your life. So. A very distinguished cognitive aging researcher, Werner Shia, was asked once when he was giving a talk, how many Sudoku puzzles do I need to do every day? And he said, it depends on how many you can get done during your 30-minute walk.
Oh, that's cool. I love that. Gosh, I love that. All right. So last thing, and this has been one of the quickest hours I can ever remember. If we could just, what are you working on next? Because again, you're kind of the epicenter of all this, of social and I guess thinking through the psychology of happiness and the sociology of it. And again, I've been reading your work for so many years. What's kind of next on the horizon for you guys?
Well, they're all really interconnected. I don't have to say this to you. That is financial security, education, exercise, friendships. All of these things interact to lead to long and healthy lives or short, unhappy lives. And we have begun a project at the Stanford Center on Longevity that we call the New Map of Life. And what we're trying to do is to take that challenge that I proposed to you a few minutes ago. That is, we got 30 extra years of life expectancy almost doubled. Let's zoom out, start from the beginning, go all the way to the end, and say, how would we create a world that will support people from early life to very late life in ways that at every stage they feel a sense of belonging, purpose, and worth? That involves rethinking education, rethinking the nature of family, rethinking friendships, rethinking work, rethinking financial security. How do we achieve it? How do we make sure that long lives are not just about a small percentage of affluent people, but that we can create a world where the majority of people arrive at later life financially secure, mentally sharp, and physically fit. We're going to do that.
I love that. The new map.
The
new map of life. I think we're gonna wrap it there. So, listen, thank you so much, Laura. Really, just a really fun conversation around all the things that you've studied forever, and the things that I think our audience really cares about, because it is. I think that the way you. I think it is almost foundational, where we have this, you got money, let's get the money part first, and then all these building blocks on top of it. It may be even better to think about it as a web, as they're all equally important. And the web has to be the social connections and the money, as opposed to almost this, you've got to get one at a time. I like the thought of having it all interconnected all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I like it too. I think of them as three legs of a stool. Financial security is one of them. But we need to bolster more than that. What a pleasure it's been to talk with you. And I think what you're doing is so important, Wes. Thank you. Thanks for getting the word out and helping people think creatively about long lives.
Well, I'm going to send you a book, and only send me back a grade if it's a decent one.
Okay,
Decent. I'll
will
take
do.
decent.
Okay, decent.
What the Happiest Retirees Know, graded by Professor